I'm Shelley Stevens for our visitors. And Lori Rotman, I want you to, we are the co-chairs of HBT's Lifelong Learning Committee. So greetings to all of you in person and on Zoom. Oh, I can't see you. As including, we're happy to have Congregation Dorsey Tzedek here because they're without heat. Am I right? Still? Whatever. Okay. So we're here for the annual Alan J. Worters Lecture. Alan was a beloved congregant who developed a love for Jewish learning later in life. He participated in the Maya program and then went on to have an adult B'nai Mitzvah along with his wife, Paula, and 7 other congregants, including myself. We were proud to be the first adult B'nai Mitzvah class. And we affectionately referred to him in class as Rev. Alan. After Alan passed away in 2005, Paul established a fund for this lecture series to honor Alan and his love of Jewish learning. And we here can't see, but there are others on Zoom. I want to acknowledge Paula and her daughter Hannah, who are with us on Zoom. Paula and Hannah live out in California. So welcome. And now to our speaker. Are you still hearing me? Yeah. Okay. All right. So we're very happy to welcome Rabbi Deborah Waxman to Temple HPT today. She has quite a long bio. So for sake of time, I'm going to use my New York speed, and I don't want to pass up too many things, but we'll make it short, okay? So Rabbi Waxman has been serving as president of Reconstructing Judaism since 2014. And is also the president of Reconstructionist Rabbinical College. She's an accomplished scholar, writer, and speaker. She also earned a doctorate from Columbia University in American Jewish history. Rabbi Waxman leads through close collaboration and visits numerous congregations around the country. I think we're up to about 100 affiliates, and you've been to, someone told me, about 60 or more, so you get around. Okay. She makes public appearances in person and online and has written for The Forward, The Times of Israel, HuffPost, and many other news and academic outlets. She has more publications than I can mention here, so I encourage you to go to Reconstructing Judaism website and see a long list of her writing. Now, this will be really of interest to you that Rabbi Waxman is the creator and host of the podcast, Hashivenu, Jewish Teachings on Resilience. Rabbi Waxman has been described as projecting a vision of Judaism that embraces all people and inspires Jews to be strong allies to the most vulnerable among us. During Lori and my Zoom meetings with Rabbi Waxman, I experienced a warm, collaborative, and dynamic person who's clearly passionate about her work and is also a phenomenal listener. So we're eager to have Rabbi Waxman talk. I'm going to turn it over to her to talk about resilience and Reconstructionism, principles and practices for challenging times. In terms of logistics, the rabbi will talk and then we'll take questions for some discussion. Okay, we're good?
Thank you. I'm so glad to be with you. Can you hear me okay? That's great. Rabbi Barbara Penzer and I started talking about this visit last year, and it's usually in November, and I was in Israel and in Palestine visiting the West Bank for most of last November. So we decided it would be wise to defer it to this year, and it turns out to be a very timely moment to come and visit with you. Thanks so much to Lori and Shelley for the wonderful conversations. We had a great meeting the first week of October, and we thought we were very close to zeroing in on a topic. And then we touched base the second week of October and said, let's wait. This is a very live moment, and we'll hone in on what we're going to talk about as the date approached and got ever closer. So this ever-changing path forward, this constantly shifting reality that I think is quite seismic, is something that we are struggling with the way you are in your community at Reconstructing Judaism, the central organization of the Reconstructionist movement. There's just so much going on. We are all of us directly or close to directly affected by the events in the Middle East, and we are all somewhat traumatized, and there are changes in the American environment as well. I'll share with you that I'll unpack a little bit more about who we are. We are many things reconstructing Judaism to many people. We are not a policy organization. We don't have any particular, we have deep connection to the region, but not necessarily any really deep wisdom or insight that would allow us to speak to the tactics or the precise policies on the ground. We have values commitments and the like. So what we are really focusing in on Reconstructing Judaism, and we decided to focus in on today, is how to be in community together across our differences. There's a wide range of opinion on many things across the Reconstructionist movement, and especially about Israel and about Palestine, and why be in a community is not a question in the Reconstructionist movement. There is really very strong commitment to this, but how to be is not so easy. Why to nurture and, as you all know from your own experience, to nurture and support and find sanctuary in the aftermath or even the midst of trauma. Of course, we want to bolster community, but how right now we are all we're experiencing fissures and fractures. So I'm going to share some concrete, at the end, I'll share some concrete resources that we offer at Reconstructing Judaism, and there are more that are being generated every single day. And right now I'm going to talk about some practices and some characteristics, but I'm going to start with a story. I am the head of an organization that was created about 14 years ago with the merger of the Rabbinical College and the Congregational Union. And in 2018, we held our first movement-wide convention in 8 years, and we didn't know who would come. It was the first time this new organization that's now called Reconstructing Judaism was offering this. So we planned for about 350 people, and we had more than 700 people show up. We had to shut down registration because the 2 hotels said enough, we don't have enough space. So that was thrilling. It was right after the Pittsburgh shooting, and it was so amazing to be together. And there was a lot of desire for the next convention. So sometime, I think it was 2019, we announced we're going to do another convention in 2022. We announced it, but then COVID. So all along, we never canceled. We always were hopeful that we would be able to have this convention. In the end, we got lucky. It came off, and it was right at this moment between Delta and Omicron that we were able to have more than 460 people came together in person. We ended up planning essentially 3 conventions: the ones for the people in the room, the one for the people who were only doing it virtual, and the ones for the hybrid, when we would try to bring them together. And it was tremendously successful. It was also tremendously hard. You should see the logistics that we went through this morning to try to make certain that the folks on Zoom and those of you in the room have a similarly high quality experience. So the highlight, it was amazing to be together. The content across was amazing. And the highlight for me was a plenary panel on Friday morning on creating inclusive communities. And I want to dive right into some of what was shared in that panel to frame our conversation today. And I think I think it will illuminate our topic, and it will also teach a little bit and reinforce a little bit about key Reconstructionist approaches. So the panel was introduced by Dr. Tressa Grauer, who is our Vice President for Thriving Communities. And I just pulled a couple of excerpts from each of the speakers to share with you, because it gets to the heart of what we're talking about. And this whole panel was asking the question, how might we actualize the kind of Judaism we're committed to? A Judaism through which we build and sustain communities that reflect the diversity of the Jewish people and provide access for everyone. So that was the framing comment. And it's something that I think most communities associated with the Reconstructionist movement aspire to at all times. And it's something that is very alive in this reflection of the diversity of the Jewish people right now. And the moderator of the panel was Dr. Amanda Mabuvi, who's the head of the rabbinical program, the vice president for academic affairs at the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College. And a point that she made as she introduced the panel is that inclusion is a constantly unfolding process. It's not a destination we arrive at. It's not that we check it off once we get there. It's a process that we commit to. And she said from the outset, before we got into the discussion, that even as we always are talking about inclusive community, we are also always failing at inclusive community. And so something that we have to visit again and again and again. It's an ongoing process. The first speaker was Rabbi Ari Lev Fornari, who is the rabbi of Congregation Kol Tzedek in West Philadelphia. And Ari Lev, I put up one quote about the problems. And I would add, Ari Lev spoke about the problem of the concept of inclusion. And this, I think, extends also when we say we're a welcoming community as well, that there's a shadow side to it. On the one hand, he says it makes it sound like I should be grateful to invited to someone else's party or community, that it's a big deal that I've been included. And he's struggling because it's as if someone has gone out of their way to extend a late invitation to the party, but it wasn't really ever meant for me. And that is part of like that, this understanding that as we are a diverse community, that we are changed. It's not come on in about and join what we're already doing, but in this effort to meet people where they are, that we will be transformed by the people who come into the room and who join us. And there's another thing that he said that's not on the screen. He had an image of the congregation almost like a Beit Midrash, a hall of study. And he said, it's not about inviting folks in to crowd onto the benches that are already there. He said, we need to add more benches to every Beit Midrash so that all of the unanswered questions of our time can be attended to by the collective wisdom of so many people who have not been granted access to tradition and community. The next speaker was Rabbi Julia Watts-Belzer. She's not associated with the Reconstructionist movement formally. She's a professor at Georgetown University. She's absolutely a friend of the movement. You can see she uses a wheelchair, and she was asking about aspect, and she's a very poetic writer. She has a book that just came out that I would really recommend, and she talks about what it feels like when we really belong. You know, when she asks, what does that mean? It means that feeling that slides down our spines when we know we are wanted and cherished, when we know we are in community that has our backs. And she gives some examples about what that might mean, that might feel like. There are two more speakers. Shahana McKinney Baldwin lives out in, she's a member of our congregation out in Madison, Wisconsin, and she reinforced Amanda's point. She's the co-chair. She just finished as the co-chair of the Tikkun Olam Commission, and she's just starting as the chair of the Jews of Color and Allies Advisory Group. She said this is, like as Amanda, this is a constant process. We need to be expanding and contracting all the time, re-examining all the time. So definitely things are very alive for most of our communities right now, with a lot of motion, with a lot of expansion and contraction. And then the last speaker was Rabbi Elliot Tepperman, who is the rabbi of our congregation in Montclair, New Jersey, B'nai Keshet. And it was so potent and powerful. He talked about it is how challenging it is to create and sustain meaningful community, and that even there definitely will be struggle, and that it is knowing that there will be struggle. It's so important to bring an equal measure of love and compassion to balance out that struggle. And he had this image of the synagogue as a container for practicing how we do this, including owning our mistakes and our errors and doing tshuva, repenting and repairing where needed. And he pointed out that this is a container that doesn't exist in very many places in our society. And that is the way that I think synagogue is both a sanctuary, not just this room, but also a haven. And it's one of the reasons why it is so hard right now, that there are challenges and where it feels hard. So I'm gonna, for the folks on Zoom, we can stop sharing for a little bit. I mentioned that across the Reconstructionist movement, there is so much diversity. In fact, Reconstructionism was founded on a commitment to diversity. If you think about Judaism as the evolving religious civilization of the Jewish people, and that's a definition of Reconstructionism, the nouns there are civilization and people. And the idea behind the understanding Judaism as a civilization was to note that there were many different ways of being Jewish. Religious, praying together on the holidays or on Shabbat was very, very, very important, but it was not the only way in. That folks could come in through activism, folks could come in through cultural engagement, folks could come in through study, and that the people, we are the ones who create it, we are the ones who it is for. Those are the nouns, those are the muscular words in that definition, and it was Reconstruction exists to affirm all the different ways and all the different kinds of people, and there are many, many, many axes of diversity in the Jewish people. The panel that I just really quickly reviewed for you included a trans person, a couple of BIPOC folks, Black, they happen to both be Black, a person with a disability, and Elliot Tepperman, a white, straight, cisgender man, who commented that how extraordinary it was for him to be in the minority on a panel for a change. At that panel, we did not speak about political difference. It was not necessarily the most pressing question. We were aware, we knew for sure. There were other panels that did talk about Israel and Palestine and the Reconstructionist approach, but we did not include that as one of the axes, as an axis of difference. And it is something that we are feeling very intensely right now across the Reconstructionist movement, indeed in the wider world, a wide range of opinions, a wide range of commitments. Almost everyone I know, and I'm sure this is true for you, is in agonizing pain. And as I said earlier, we are all traumatized by what's going on and frequently responding from a visceral place, from that place of trauma. Many of us hold different political analyses, and it may be that we have different ends that we want. So there is this mandate in Judaism that we come together in the community, that symbolized by the minyan, the minimum quorum of 10. And there's a commandment further, al tifros min hatzibur, don't separate yourself from the community. And this, I think, is one of the most important things that when we live in two civilizations, one of the most important things that we can draw out of the Jewish tradition in the service of building lives of meaning and connection in America, because there's such a trend toward radical individualism that isolates us, that helps to contribute to this epidemic of loneliness that we've been suffering even before the pandemic and even before the polarization. We invite Reconstructionist communities to come together in what I sometimes call covenantal community, deep and abiding relationship across difference. And it's really hard. It is really, really hard to do, especially right now. I think that our communities tend to have more practice at it and more muscle for it than many other spaces in American Jewish life right now. And it's hard everywhere, and including in our communities. So I'm hoping this will work. I'm going to actually show just a brief clip from that panel about what happened at B'nai Keshet over a political argument that Rabbi Elliot Tepperman shared with the community. So Rabbi Noyo is going to call it up for the folks on Zoom, and I am going to share it for the folks in the room.
So I'm going to tell a story. It is an imperfect story on many levels, not least of which. So I'm going to tell a story. It is an imperfect story on many levels, not least of which is because I think all the main characters are men. I am not trying to put men at the center of this discussion. But it is a story of love and compassion. So at my synagogue that I serve, one Shabbat, this was before the pandemic, We were having a reception right in the middle of our sanctuary, which is also our social hall. And it was after a B'nai Mitzvah, 2 twins. And I was eating food and I looked over and I started to hear in the very center of the room, voices rising. And I turned, as did sort of everybody in the congregation, to see one beloved member of our synagogue stand up and say something to the effect of, like, how dare you? How dare you? I will not be laughed at, and open his palm and hit in the face another beloved member of our synagogue, who fell to the floor. Equally beloved, both members. And I walked over to him as fast as I could. I'll call him Mark, that's not his name. I said, Mark, come with me. We have to go. So we walked out of the synagogue, and I just said, this isn't who you are. Like, what happened there? You know, and I won't go into all the details, but I'll just simply say that, you know, he wept. He was so ashamed. We talked and we walked for like an hour. I finally came back to the synagogue, and I had forgotten the only person who was left was my 15-year-old son, who was just super patiently waiting for me. Through many phone calls and efforts of reconciliation, the person who was hit, who I'll just call Leo, went out during that week and they did real repair work. This was a political discussion. And the following Shabbat, they both came up to the bima for an aliyah. And they said very explicitly, we understand that this is an aliyah of reconciliation. So, like I said, it's an imperfect story. Had things been slightly different, at least one of those people probably wouldn't be a member of our synagogue anymore. But I'm grateful that we can tell that story to the whole congregation as an instance of what it can mean to create a community of belonging that even includes people when they step out of line or when they cross a line, and that we can, at least sometimes, be a container that can allow for that kind of reconciliation.
Okay. So it was what we're hoping as a movement, what we're hoping as a central organization to do is to foster the kinds of community that can, that can ideally not go to that place, and that if we go to that place, we have the relationships and the tools to come back from that place. May there never be violence. That's part of that. I heard many of you gasp, and that there's on the video, there's a gasp by Amanda, who was moderating, because it is such a shocking story. What my wife always teaches, what we put our attention to grows. So what I want to put the attention to is what it means to be a thriving community, what it means to be what it means to be resilient, what it means to thrive in times of joy, and what it means to thrive, to be connected in the hardest times as well. And we're definitely in hard times right now. When we think about it, the department that works with communities that are affiliated with the Reconstructionist movement is called the Department of Thriving Communities. So we spend a lot of time thinking about what it means. What does this mean when we say this? And we say that we're the images of a home, the images of a sanctuary, a place of growth and comfort, sometimes at least. A place where individuals can bring our whole selves and not leave essential part of our identities behind. More than anything, a place of deep connection to others with a resulting sense of mutual obligation. In a nutshell, we're talking about a place of belonging. There is no cookie cutter for how this is achieved within Reconstructionist communities. How HBT will do it is different from how Dorsey Tzedek will do it, is different from how B'nai Keshet did it, is different from how Kol Tzedek will do it. But it is, and that it's different because it's so much about relationships, and it is so much about culture, and it is so much about processes that you have in place or processes that you might want to bring into place, processes and procedures. But even as we see that each community has its own personality, we do see that across the Reconstructionist movement, there are certain characteristics in Reconstructionist congregations that answer how do we cultivate a thriving community. And these tend to be that our communities, your community, is people-centered and relationship-driven, that there's a balance between the I and the we, that's not the we at the expense of the I or the I expense of we, that we want to find the best possible balance between helping each and every individual flourish and also tend to the flourishing of the entire community. Our communities tend to be, are not always, but tend to be intergenerational communities, and that in that what Amanda and Shahana were talking about, constantly redefining what it means to be an intentional community in partnership with each other, in partnership with the rabbi. Reconstructionist communities tend to have a very empowered laity. It takes a lot of work to be a Reconstructionist. We are together building our communities. It's one of the reasons I think we tend towards smaller congregations and why our movement will always be on the smaller side, because not everybody wants to do the level of work that it takes to maintain this kind of community. I think the reward is vastly worth it, but each of us makes our own calculation. The tagline of Reconstructing Judaism is that we are deeply rooted and boldly relevant. And that carries through to thriving communities as well. That the deeply rooted means that there's a commitment that we are Jewish communities. There are many folks who are not Jewish, who are Jewish adjacent in our communities, but that we turn to Jewish wisdom and practice to ground ourselves. And at the same time, we look ahead, that we're open to innovation, that there's a clear understanding that Judaism is evolving and we are drivers of that evolution, and that we need to look inward in terms of what kind of changes do we need to make in community, and we need to look ahead out to the wider world. What is it that we need to attend to? What is it that we might want to embrace? So we find, in addition to these characteristics, that there are practices that help to foster inclusive and thriving communities. And these tend to be informed by curiosity rather than certainty. Reconstructionism is, we are profoundly anti-fundamentalist. And with that understanding of evolution and with that understanding of diversity, there's an openness and a curiosity that kind of resists a fierce certainty that I'm right and you're wrong, or that this is the only pathway forward. There is an interest in forming abiding relationships. And I talked about the image of home as a place of comfort, but alongside that is also the capacity for discomfort, especially around the change. And that if sometimes something is new, or if something is different, can be quite uncomfortable, and to kind of lean into that, what's behind that discomfort and how can we grow through it. That's helpful to have when there's because in a willingness to experiment, there is this potential for failure. There's potential for things going sideways in unexpected ways. And I think this is so important. There is an insistence on maintaining community across difference based on shared fundamental values, one of them being the centrality of relationships. The practices include the constant nurturing of anava, humility, alongside chesed, overflowing and generous loving kindness. And the willingness, as we saw in the anecdote that Rabbi Elliott shared, to do tshuva, to make repentance where necessary, and to make tikkun, repair. Our communities, the practice of being ready to change, both on an individual level and a collective level, helps with the potential for thriving. And the most important is the seeking of joy, even in the hardest times, maybe especially at the hardest times. I'll share with you that some of the ways that we achieve this in the larger movement, and this is true in some of our communities as well, is that we spell out behavioral norms in most of the settings that we sponsor. So at the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College, where we train rabbis to be, from a Reconstructionist perspective, that we have community commitments that we study at the beginning of every year, and that we ask every student and every faculty member to commit to. At the conventions that I talked about, where we pulled together folks from more than 60 congregations, or last spring when we went on a pilgrimage to civil rights sites in the South, where we had folks from more than 40 congregations, we put forward behavioral norms and asked people to review them and to abide by them in the trip. It gives a baseline of what the expectation is, and it gives a mechanism for accountability. Not coming down hard, but an invitation, a calling in, the way that it was illustrated in that story. I'll share a little bit more about this resource, but Ritual Well is a website where we offer a Reconstructionist approach to the wider world, and I'll unpack a little bit more about what Ritual Well is. It's the most extensive online resources curating original progressive Jewish rituals. And in addition to crowdsourced, curated rituals, Ritual Well also holds classes for individuals, some of whom are members of the Reconstructionist movement and many of whom are not. And in those online classes, we put forward behavioral norms as well. And we have another one of our websites is Evolve. It's kind of small, I'm sorry, which is a groundbreaking Jewish conversations. And it's a website that posts deliberative essays and other resources and fosters covenantal conversation. These are discussions on brave and hard topics, but the mandates are these that we must, and then they're listed here, that we, across our difference, that we have these abiding values. Here for Evolve, it's Tselem Elohim, regarding and treating all people as created in the divine image, kavod, respect, redifat shalom, pursuing peace, and machloket l'shem shamayim, disagreement for the sake of heaven. And these norms give us we sketch out the community, the pop-up or the online or the in-person community that we want to be creating. And so those lists that of practices that I shared are drawn from congregations across the Reconstructionist movement, from those norms that I just spoke about. And I at the end of this, there's a link to that panel that I drew from at the start of this talk that has so many beautiful insights. So these are abiding practices that I just laid out, and I think they're kind of like, they are necessary maybe, or very, very important for the moment, and maybe not sufficient. This is such a challenging time, and I think this time requires all of this, and it requires more. And more than anything, what I want to raise up is that this is a moment, I think, within our communities to find different ways of being together. And here I'm drawing very heavily from the wisdom that's offered up by Resetting the Table, which is a group that has been working for 15 years to try to help the American Jewish community develop different muscles and how to talk about Israel and Palestine. And part of what they teach is that before speaking, we want to listen. Not so easy for Jews. Especially those of us who were raised in an Ashkenazi background, the idea of listening with each other, not for the sake of argumentation, not listening for, wait, how am I going to respond to whatever it is that you just said? How am I going to rebut that? What is the best rhetorical argument I can make? But rather listening to make space for another person, listening to meet another person and to foster that relationship, listening maybe for our own transformation. And then when we do speak, and again, I come from a family where we argue at each other over the Shabbat table, and that's just the rhythm that we follow. When we do speak, to try as hard as we can to speak from a place of where we are in I statements and grounded in story and experience, rather than in rhetoric or argument or political position. As I said, it's not a dominant paradigm in the American Jewish community, and it is certainly not what's going on in the American larger environment. And social media makes it 100 times worse. If I had any advice, I would say stay offline as much as you possibly can, because it makes it 100 times worse. I'm not certain I'm recommending that, but it's certainly been one of the ways that I have gotten through this last month. There is, we know, so much we do not have control over right now that has just been slammed home to us repeatedly. And it's also getting clearer and clearer to me that what we do have control over is how we respond to this moment and how we choose to act individually and collectively. At the heart of a Reconstructionist approach is a kind of intentional optimism. And I've been worried, especially this last month, is it too naive? Is it up to this moment? And I want to double down on it. That this capacity to recognize and draw out the goodness in every person, this understanding of the agency that we as humans have to act in partnership with the divine, to make God's presence and manifest God's attributes in our world. I want to double down on the fact that this is not naivete, but rather it is about intentionally choosing who I am, who we are, who we want to be, and what kind of world we want to live in, what kind of world we want to create for the next generation. So this is, I think, really holy work, and we are so honored at Reconstructing Judaism to help you do this in an existential way and in some very, very practical way. I just want to share a couple of tachlis resources before we open it up. Each congregation has a liaison who works individually with the congregation, and for both Dorshei Tzedek and HBT, your liaison is Rabbi Maurice Harris, and so he is a conduit to help you access resources and to help answer questions. He also happens to be our Israel specialist, so he's very busy and very well informed at this moment. I talked a little bit about Ritual Well and its mandates, and Ritual Well has received literally, I think, 60 submissions in the last months, poems and prayers that are trying to speak to the current moment. And I have been incorporating them into my services and into teachings that I have done. So that's a place, a resource that many individuals are finding and communities are using for collective gathering. I shared Evolve. I shared the behavioral norms, and it has a rich collection of, it has many topics, but including very rich ones on Israel and Palestine. If you go on to Evolve in the next couple of days, it's probably going to look different, because right now it has only the top of the, there's many resources. And if you were, this is a screenshot, if you scroll down, there are tiles, but we want to actually probably make it a little bit more interactive and have multiple things at the top of the page. So that's one of the ways that we're kind of pivoting right now. And this is from the Reconstructing Judaism website, reconstructingjudaism.org. This is a middle of our page on Israel. You see these multiple tiles. That there's the Joint Israel Commission that includes elected representatives from Reconstructionist congregations and appointed rabbis. That's why it's a joint commission, and the work that they're doing. Shutafut is about partnership with Israeli organizations, NGOs that are working on civil society, including on coexistence and peace, organizations that really could, are doing crucial work at this moment in time. A link to the positions and statements that we've been making, maybe in the quick Q&A, I can talk a little bit more about that. And then links to the 2 websites that I just showed you. So again, as I just had to repeat what I just said, this is hard work. This is holy work, and it is such a blessing to be doing it with you. So with that, I want to open it up for questions and conversation.
So if you have questions, I'll hand you the mic. Ooh.
I'm sorry, I'm breaking the rules. I desperately need a drink.
Hi, my name's Claudia, and a 3-part question. Rabbi Daniel Siegel, who was is still a Jewish renewal rabbi, but he was a member of our congregation about 25 years ago, taught a class on Machlokat L'Shem Shemayim. So it's been very important to me ever since. The notion of managing differences engaging in differences brings you closer to the name of heaven, closer to godliness. As a therapist, it's also very important to me, the awareness that when we are in survival mode, when a saber-toothed tiger is after us as mammals, then we are binary. It is either or. It's survival, or we're lunch or we're not. And so bringing those 2 together is very hard, because this is then the 3rd thing that's hard for me. So as a white middle-class American, how do I then say to somebody whose survival is being threatened, so that they are then, of course, in hyper arousal or sympathetic or in polyvagal terms, they are there. So how can I say to them, well, let's do Machlokat L'Shem Shemayim, let's be in ventral vagal, let's be, we're both safe enough to engage in, this process together, but my survival's not being threatened, and yet I need it in my community. So it's a complicated question. Was that clear or not?
Well, I mean, it's exactly what I'm trying to speak to, for sure. One of the things that we're trying to do is, the Reconstructionist movement, our approach is very much about complexity and nuance. This is not a nuanced moment. And we try to move beyond binaries, the either or, and for sure, the trauma reaction, there's so much reactivity. I think that's where practices are really important. That it's not. I'll tell you a story that many years ago. I had a relationship with a little chavura in Syracuse, New York, where I led high holiday services for them the whole time that they were in existence, over 12 years. And the community was mostly a group of people who were refugees from a classical reform synagogue up there, but there was a subsection of folks who were working on Israel. They were working in support of Palestinian rights, and they had been chased out of the conservative synagogue. This was in the the late aughts. And they were very wounded. And about 5 years in, so this was at a moment when it was pretty clear that Oslo was kind of going off the rails. So it was nowhere near as acute as this moment, but it was not a good moment around Israel-Palestine. I had been there long enough that I was prepared to finally, I felt like as a rabbi who was just kind of parachuting into community, I really couldn't take on helping them reshape new community norms. And after about 5 years, I felt like I could do it. And I worked with my wife, who is an educator, a very wise person, and we created very strict protocols about, this is for a study session on Rosh Hashanah afternoon, about what we would talk about. It was not an unbounded conversation. We intended that we talked just about a couple of things. What is your experience of Israel? I think was one of the questions, and just so limited. limited. And I broke them into groups and I said, please, please, please follow these protocols. It had about 4 or 5 steps to it. Half the group followed the protocols and had these incredible conversations, unlike anything they'd ever had. And half the group put the paper down and just started talking about Israel and Palestine and started screaming at each other within 5 minutes. So thank God that folks who were in need of healing were in the first group. This is to say that negotiating together what we're going to talk about one-on-one or in community and how we're going to talk about it before can help to shatter the binary. Not always and not only. And there are some conversations too. I think that privileging the relationship first and foremost is really incredibly important, so that there's this moment to say, this is not going the way we want it to go. Can we pause? Can we restart? Can we set aside? Can we return at another moment? Can we take a walk outside for 15 minutes and then come back together? Let our nervous system settle down and come back together and start again. So I think it's a very different way of interacting with each other than we ordinarily do. And I'll share one more thing with you, which is, I started this podcast, Hashivenu, Jewish Teachings on Resilience, in December of 2016, because I was feeling very, very aroused and very, very anxious about the state of American democracy. And it's been 4 years, 7 years, 6, wow. I think there's 52 episodes, and I will share with you, we've had a lot of different ways we've focused the podcast. And I wasn't certain, maybe we were going to wind the podcast down. Maybe we don't need to talk, this was so helpful to me in that moment. Other people told me that it was helpful to them. Maybe we could move beyond the resilience orientation, way back into the resilience orientation. And that we recorded an episode that went live, I think, last week with Rabbi Yoshi Silverstein, who founded he's not a rabbi, that's so funny. Yoshi Silverstein, who founded the Mitsui Collective, which does embodied somatic anti-racism work. And he's a return guest. And I shared with him that I just noticed I keep holding my breath. I just keep, again and again, I keep holding my breath, which wreaks havoc on your nervous system. And one of the things that the approaches for the Resilience podcast is to marry certain practices out of psychology or out of somatics to Jewish teaching, and to kind of bring together those two worlds. And I remembered that one of the things that I had offered up right at the beginning of the pandemic, we recorded a lot of episodes because that was the time when people were starting to listen to a lot of podcasts. A little mini episode, usually I have a guest, but this was just me teaching box breathing. Teaching about the intertwining between soul, neshama, and breath, nishima. You know, our prayer book series is called Kol HaNeshama, from the last line of the last psalm in the book of Psalms, Kol HaNeshama Tehalelia. And we translate it as let every living thing sing God's praises. And, you know, so that intersection between every living thing and the breath that animates us. And so I do some lovely teaching about all of that. And then in the end, very, very practically, teaching box breathing. Do you guys know it? So 4 in, 4, hold 4, 4 out, hold 4. I thought, I got to do this. Like I've completely forgotten about it. And multiple times a day and multiple times a night, because I'm not a great sleeper, I am tapping into this practice that helps to actually take me out of the most reactive space. And so in some of my meetings, especially some of the ones that feel like they're really fraught, we're starting sometimes with breathing. We're starting sometimes sitting together. Sometimes we're singing together. before we start the conversation. And it just takes us to, I think, A, a calmer place, and B, a shared place. So, there's a Zoom question. Is that right? There's a Zoom question. Rabbi Noyo is asking, so.
Rich is asking, in reference to a bullet point under the characteristics slide, it puts together intergenerational community being an intentional community and partnership between the rabbi and empowered lay people. And he says, those are three things that each have importance, and I wonder why you put them together. We at HBT are going through a visioning process, and there have been many calls for intergenerational interaction. So the question of how to achieve that is very much top of mind for us. I wonder about the relevance of your combination of these factors in thinking about how to do this well.
What a great question. I mean, they're together simply for brevity, and for, for reinforcing richness. It's a great point, and maybe I'll unpack them. Again, as I said, every community is different. There is no cookie cutter model. And one of the things that we do at Reconstructing Judaism is we really understand ourselves to be network weavers. And we really understand ourselves to be helping affiliated communities learn from each other and share resources. And so what a strategy for fostering intentional communities that may work for you to share it out so that others can benefit from it, and it may not work in another setting. And for you to have, through the president's listserv or through a conversation with your congregational liaison, or we run phone calls every month, sometimes for leadership like presidents or treasurers, and increasingly we're expanding the audience. The Thriving Community runs phone calls on everything from some of these topics, like how to foster an intergenerational community, or what the partnership between the rabbi and lay people might look like. And some of it is more substantive. Some of it's process and governance, and some of it's substantive and content. We ran a very well-attended one right before the 2022 election about how to prepare for potential disruption in communities if there was a lot of election denying going on. So we want to share the resources. I think that they're together because I think all of them practice like intentional community, like intentionality, whether it's through norms, whether it's through how you structure your services, whether it's through how you plan your program year, the kind of like articulating of resources, and then articulating of values, and then trying to bring to life the community and in ways that make those values manifest. And the effective partnership between rabbis and lay people, it doesn't necessarily guarantee intergenerationality. And as I said, we have some communities that are intentionally kind of oriented toward one particular age group, and we have some communities that want to be intergenerational and are aging and are not necessarily. So and there are different strategies that will work for different communities. So I think when we think that when the intentionality and the partnership is there, and when there is the success, the desire for, and then strategies that achieve intergenerationality, that is definitely something that, if we don't really have metrics for what a thriving community looks like, but those are things that we check off that we tend to see. And so we tend to, and most of our affiliated communities are interested in achieving all of those. So I appreciate it, and I might break them out. And I think you are exactly right, Rich, that the pathways toward achieving each of those adjectives, nouns, each of those outcomes, maybe I'll say, are different, although often overlapping and ideally reinforcing. What more than anything, what we don't want any of us to do, we are all stretched thin. We are all pulled in many directions. Every single community in the Reconstructionist movement and Reconstructing Judaism, we are under-resourced. We punch above our weight in the Reconstructionist movement. What we don't want to have to do is have anybody working at cross purposes and pursuing one thing toward intergenerationality that is going to undercut other things that are really important. So ideally, as much as possible, mutually reinforcing.
Thank you for your words. This is sort of an emergent piece, but one thing when I try and come from humility and anava, is really important for me to not think what I see is better than. But in this current moment, I'm really struggling with, are we naming our underlying Jewish values and are they being practiced? And it feels to me that both in the binary and sometimes when people talk about it with more complexity, I don't recognize the values that are being, either no values are being espoused and it is sort of protection or dogma, or the values don't seem to represent what I grew up in Reconstructionism.
I so appreciate your question. It's emergent for me too. And I am, I've been wondering, I've never, ever used the big tent language to talk about the Reconstructionist movement because we aren't particularly oriented toward the right, politically and religiously. And I have had folks, not from within the Reconstructionist movement mostly, and not recently, but early in my presidency, urge me to be looking over our rightward flank. And I have said, make nicer to Orthodox Judaism. And I have said that that's not where I want to put my energy. That's where I want to put our energy. So I really avoid the big tent language because I think that sets up an expectation and maybe even an obligation to really try to be all things to all people, and we are not. We are, as I said earlier, many things to many people, but we do not aspire to be all things to all people. And I am wondering if this moment is calling for an articulation of values and principles that will make some folks, I think that we tend to be, I say center left as a movement, and many folks have moved harder to the right a little bit, more than I've seen in my 30 years of experience with the Reconstructionist movement. And we have folks within our community who are very far left. And even as I'm preaching to you about how important it is to stay in abiding relationship, as Elliot said in his video, one of those individuals easily could have left the synagogue. It may be that there are moments when people say, this is no longer the place for me. And it may be that we will articulate a name core values that may precipitate that for some people. It's and hopefully we would do it evincing all the principles that I talked about, and in ways that will probably be hard for some people. It's a really intense moment, and I think I'm talking mostly about far left here. That I think folks might feel it might be complicated there. I'll share a little bit about statements right now. I mean, one of the things that that is the hallmark of the Joint Israel Commission, in particular, as I said, it's with elected representatives from Reconstructionist congregations, the Reconstructionist plenum. Names, people put their names for, they're either nominated or they self-nominate, and it's exciting. We've reached the point of health and vitality that we tend to have more applicants for the slots than we have seats. So the lay, that's where the lay representation comes from. The Reconstructionist plenum puts them forward, and then the rabbinic representatives are appointed by the Reconstructionist Rabbinical Association. And on the Joint Israel Commission are really from center right, a board member of Friends of the IDF, a former board member, pretty progressive, but a former board member of AIPAC was on the last iteration of it. Two pretty far left. Also on the last iteration was someone who was a Canadian member of the Canadian version of Jewish Voice for Peace. The huge accomplishment of the Joint Israel, they've done programming. It was on the slide I put up. They've done really important programming and created resources. And I think the biggest accomplishment of the Joint Israel Commission is that folks with that wide range of opinions stay together in conversation and in community. That is no small thing. And I think that is kind of a microcosm of the larger Reconstructionist community. We have two different ways of issuing statements and positions. There's emergent ones when something happens, we put out something, and that's a small cadre of people. Me and the board chair, Seth Rosen, I'm making everybody rabbis today. Seth Rosen, and sometimes the chair of the Israel Commission, depending on whether it's domestic or international or Israel. And then we have the more deliberative statements, positions like, so the Reconstructionist movement recently adopted a resolution in support of the study of reparations, and that was generated by the Tikkun Olam Commission. It was very, very deliberative. There was 14 months of study and lots of resources created before it, so that was lots and lots and lots of input. So Israel stuff, there's this constant tension between what requires immediate responsiveness and what should be, if not 14 months worth, but more deliberative. And of course, the Joint Israel Commission would like to be really involved in everything. And we're just, so to repeat, we are not a policy organization. We have, that commission is made up of people with a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge, a lot of passion. Some of them do have more expertise than others, but they are representatives of the larger Reconstructionist movement. They are not employees of Reconstructing Judaism. So we issued a statement on October 7th, never issued a statement on Shabbat or Simchat Torah, but it just felt absolutely necessary. And we have not formally issued a statement since then. Because of the breadth of diversity, because of the recognition that things were going to be unfolding very, very quickly, and that if we issued a statement, say, on October 14th, then chances are we were going to have to issue a statement on October 20th. I'm approximating dates, but just given how fast moving it is. And that's not what we're set up to do. And I don't believe it's necessarily going to help anyone in any, like, what we are set up to do is to try to provide resources for you to bring to light everything that I just talked about. So what we want to do is bring forward multivocal expressions and set them in either conversation and relationship, or sometimes in machlochet l'shem shemayim, in holy argument. And I think that also means setting some limits and re-articulating the core values, and also possibly setting some limits. So and so we're going to shift more into like pastoral rather than policy statements or articulations. I'm with you. It's something we're watching and sometimes worrying over and absolutely trying to figure out how to attend to.
Hi, so I guess I would want to follow up a little bit because I don't understand what you said about this isn't the Reconstructionist movement you grew up in 30 years ago. I didn't grow up in a Reconstructionist synagogue. I grew up with a very traditional that ultimately affiliated with Reform, but felt more like here. So I don't understand the context of her question. And I also was hoping you could shed some light on when you said that you think the Reconstructionist movement is center left and it may not be a comfortable place for people going forward. Are you talking about people who are more to the left, or are you talking about people who are where I think I am, center left, that are now saying I have to go right because there's no place for the Jews on the left anymore? I think that's somewhat of an extreme position, but I have many friends who've said that, and one who even said something super offensive to me, which was the only Jews left on the left are the self-hating ones. So I wouldn't go that far, but I'm looking for some clarity on where the Reconstructionist movement is so that I know that I'm in the right place.
Yeah. So, so as I said, I'm going to use the Joint Israel Commission like as an example. Wide range of opinions. The Canadian version of the Jewish Voice for Peace, they are anti-Zionists. So, so wide range of opinions. Some of them I think would say they're non-Zionists, or some of them would say that their highest priority is Palestinian solidarity, and they don't want to engage in the discourse of Zionism. So there is a wide range of opinion that is included in the larger Reconstructionist movement and in the on the Joint Israel Commission. The Reconstructionist movement was founded as a Zionist movement. It has always been a pretty left, it's been a progressive Zionist movement. So in 1969, in the pages of the Reconstructionist, the journal of the Reconstructionist movement, there was a call to return the territories to the Palestinians. So, and which was unimagined. It was one of the very first voices that would call for that. In 1981, 82, there was support for the Madrid conference, urging the Israeli government to begin conversations with the Palestinians. I started rabbinical school in 1993, and they canceled classes the second or third week of school, and we all crowded in to the Hadar Keilah, to our community room, and we watched the signing of the Oslo Accords, and we counted off the Reconstructionists who were in the Rose Garden at the White House because there had been so much involvement in that progressive Zionist vision. Most recently, I would say, we've been incredibly supportive of the democracy protest. We've been incredibly supportive of the democracy protests, insisting that the Israel that we want to lean into is one that is at once Jewish and democratic. I published an article in Sapir, which is a pretty center-right journal. It's edited by Brett Stevens. It's put out by the Maimonides Fund, that they asked me to write for the 75th anniversary of Israel last spring. And the title, they asked me to write on non-Orthodox North American Jewish perspectives and relationship with Israel. And the title that they gave my article, which it's not the one I would have necessarily chosen, but I didn't object, was Israel is at risk of losing American Jews. And the point that I made is that Mordecai Kaplan, when he was as a Zionist, he would have preferred a confederation rather than a nation state, because he was deeply, deeply worried about religious authority married to state power in the way that Ben-Gvir or Smotrich brought it to life, and that the concerns that he had both about the suppression of religious pluralism and the predominance of a Jewish supremacist vision that would be absolutely devastating for women, or he wasn't particularly concerned about queer folks, but women and non-Jews. Somewhat, he was somewhat attentive to Arabs, but just anyone who wasn't a halachic male. He was writing about that in the 40s and the 50s, and they were prior to October 7th in overdrive in Israel. So that progressive Zionism with also no litmus test on Israel for membership. So there is space for folks who have not much of a relationship with Israel, whether or not they're overtly diasporists, or whether they're not because they just don't, and it's not in their contract. I was in Michigan last week, and I had coffee with a colleague who's an American Jewish historian who said, "I've never been to Israel. My entire vision and experience and aspirations for Judaism is about its existence in America." So she's not an anti-Zionist. It's not in her consciousness. So I think, and I may have been projecting in my own anxieties, but in the no litmus test on Israel comes the question about whether or not we need, I'm going to say it in what I am feeling very powerfully right now. And I understand that I hold a position of power, and I'm the president and CEO of the movement. And so the question for me going forward is, this is something that I proclaim, or this is something that we set in motion movement conversations for stronger, a more collective proclamation. I do think that there's I'm deeply committed to the multiple axes of diversity that I listed at the beginning of this talk, including political. And I think expressive of Reconstructionism and is a commitment to Jewish peoplehood that does not crowd out Palestinian solidarity, that does not negate the desire for some just and lasting solution to for the Palestinian people, but that is a full-throated acknowledgement of commitment to Jewish solidarity and Jewish peoplehood alongside or on its own, and that also that Israel has a right to exist, and that feels deeply Reconstructionist to me, and that feels, to my surprise, maybe needs to be articulated more clearly. Vis-a-vis the abandonment of the left, I think that I've spent a lot of time on one of the outcomes of COVID is that at the beginning of the pandemic, many roundtables for CEOs have been established, and we have a lot of, and they've lasted. And I'm on a lot of call, and because I have a dual role as a seminary head and a movement head, and we're also very involved in the Jewish social justice sector, I've been on a lot of conversations with a lot of CEOs, and we're hearing a lot of different things about folks who work in alliance with progressives, and that there are folks within different communities that feel very betrayed and very abandoned. And then I'm hearing also about communities that feel really supported and connected by their allies. So, that their allies really came through for them. And so I think what we are trying to do, the work that we are doing, the Reconstructionist movement, more than anything, is about trying to foster generativity and connection to provide havens and places of sanctuary for folks in these challenging times. It's not, we're not a political organization. We are at core, we are an organization that is about, we're a religious organization, and we're a peoplehood organization. There are a lot of people who are political activists who are drawn into our communities, but that's not our primary personality. So we're not experiencing that, and we're not. What we're trying to do is just offer support for people, and so we haven't. I don't know if that speaks to your question. I hope you feel like you find a place here. We're not positioning ourselves as anything other than trying to receive and to support.
So I want to check in here about time. We have at least 3 or 4 hands that were up. There's Ed and Lisa and Hillary. Can you take those questions? Do you?
I do not have a watch and I didn't
Okay.
bring my phone up. What time
It's
is it?
5:20.
Okay.
Okay. Ed?
Thanks for coming and sharing your thoughts. And my question is a little bit different from the other question. I want to like really respect those questions. They are important, but I think it's a next step, which is I was really struck by your time about repair. And obviously this is a time that there's going to need to be a lot of repair work done. And so, and at times we've needed repair in this congregation. How does the seminary help develop those skills? And how, as we look for new rabbi, how do we identify somebody who has those skills to make everybody feel heard and to do the work of reconciliation that the Rabbi Tepperman did?
Yeah. So at the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College, at the seminary, we try very hard to train our students toward that orientation. We're doing some interventions right now. On, I think it's November 14th, we are bringing in we're doing a skills building workshop on how to talk constructively around Israel-Palestine. We think we're doing it well, and we need to boost it. We recognize at certain moments we need to boost it. We have leadership courses, we have workshops. It is something that we attend to as we're training rabbis. It would be the movement side that works with the congregation, the Reconstructing Judaism side. So we're raising up the folks that you will consider for your in your search for a settled rabbi, I hope. And then in terms of helping to provide the skills on the congregational level, the rabbi can have access to, is often very connected to Reconstruct, knows how to access them for the congregations. Rabbis also are members of, most Reconstructionist rabbis are members of the Reconstructionist Rabbinical Association. And so they're doing peer training for rabbis. And it's, again, it's some of it, it's about in conversation, what is the breach? So Elliot, the B'nai Keshet, he had the skills and the relationship. I learned about that incident at the plenum, at the session. He didn't call us for that. He's been at that congregation for a long time and was able to navigate it. The congregational consultant would talk and help to work through, like, what is the repair? Because it's not a generic conversation. We have certain practices, we have certain insights, but to work together, and it may be sometimes that you need to bring in external, like it may be beyond our capacity, but we would at least help to discern, if it's going to be like a sustained resetting the table I mentioned earlier. They come in and they work over 6 months. So it's sustained engagement with another organization. We don't have the capacity to do that kind of sustained engagement. But we can help to discern and refine who you might want to look for to help in that work. So we are conversational. We train. We aspire to train and then offer continuing education for the clergy, and we aspire to offer resources and consultation for helping you navigate whatever it is the situation. It's an intense time for your community to be in a rabbinic search. It is. It's a really intense time, and we're aware of it, and it's one of the reasons we were so glad that I'm coming. We will do what we can from afar to help you navigate this moment.
Okay, so one last question, and then we'll end the formal part of this. And if people have other questions, you can stick around for a little bit.
Thank you for being here, Rabbi. For most of us, it's something of an intellectual experience, I think. I happen to work at a public university. I've worked for about 15, 16 years with 2 other coworkers who are both Jewish. We now work in a very small room together. We aren't politically discussing Israel at all, have never. And over the years, I've tried to engage them in political activist work in the States, based on the work I do for Get Out the Vote, based on your comments on 2016 and what compelled me to do that. So I realized that I just stopped discussing this with them for many years. And then we had PLO like protests at our school a few weeks ago. And it was extremely intense. It's not like we're living in Israel and dealing with what they're dealing with every day. But one of my coworkers who I've been trying to engage for many years and thought she had no opinions was so viscerally upset about all of this, was so upset, was discussing this with us, was talking about it. Her husband was an EMT. She actually showed some real, drive on, that she cared about something really important. She said she worked with some Jewish students on campus and they were very scared for their safety. Then I heard about something that happened at Coopers and Union. It was just a very visceral experience, very, very difficult. And I didn't know if some of these resources or if this even series or lecture was regarding how to deal with this in the outside world when it comes to our borders, and it comes to our shores, and it comes to our campus, and we're there in the middle of it.
I mean, for this conversation, for this presentation, it was really geared toward your community and to this locus where we have the greatest amount of control. Campuses are a really, really, really hard place to be right now, and it is not the mission or the mandate of Reconstructing Judaism. We have only about a third of Reconstructionist rabbis serve in congregations. We have a lot of rabbis on campuses. The Reconstructionist commitment to diversity and the way we train rabbis makes it a very, Hillel's and other campus rabbinates is a very, very powerful place for them. So we're hearing a lot, in addition to what we're reading in the press, we're hearing a lot of reports from our rabbis in the field about what's going on campuses. I don't think it's particularly equivalent to what's, it's of a piece with what's going on in communities, but it is so much more acute, and it's in such a more but non-Jewish and Jewish environments and very heavily politicized. So I think that there are different strategies and different approaches that are better suited, I won't say best suited, for that kind of environment. I think that these practices, this kind of approach, maybe for you and your colleagues, may be helpful, including negotiating how you want to be together, maybe breathing, if she's so activated, maybe breathing together, or but the larger campus environment, more than anything, what I would say is for you and others to seek out resources and supports off campus or across campus, so that you are less activated. I know that I will be in a meeting a week from Tuesday with the CEO of Hillel International, and I just saw him 2 weeks ago, and they are trying to figure out what to do for Jewish students on campus. And I think that some of what they're thinking about for Jewish students also extends to staff. I mean, they're thinking about the larger campus environment in general. And I just was a board member who lives out in California, sent me an op-ed that I think was published in the LA Times by the dean of the law school out at UC Irvine, talking about the campus environment. There is some kind of reckoning going on in higher education that I don't really, around free speech and political speech, that I don't understand. And so I have a deep empathy and not that much to offer you. Thank you so much for this time together.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. I'm Raquel Rosenblatt, the president of People. It's wonderful to meet you, and thank you so much for being here. And as we've said, it was over a year in the making, and wow. So thank you so much for being here. I do just want to conclude or summarize with a few things. This was a really, really significant conversation, and I'm so grateful for you all for being here and participating here in this room, in this beautiful sanctuary, and on Zoom. This is an intense time for our community. This is a challenging time, but I want to go back to some of the first things that Rabbi Waxman said. Number one, why to be in a community is a tenet of the Reconstructionist movement. We know that. We're hearing it, we're seeing it, we're envisioning sessions right now, Rabbi Waxman, where we're talking about what we want for our future, and people are nailing it. They're saying all these things that really are the characteristics of the thriving community, and we are it. So that's amazing. So great, yay, we are so proud. Number two, how to be in a community together across our differences. That's a bit of another story. And clearly right now is the hardest time ever in our community, in our congregation ever. And that's challenging us in ways we have never been challenged before. Number three, we know what it means to be thriving in times of joy, in times of hardship. And I want to be optimistic. There's that word optimism. That's a characteristic that we can figure this out. And lastly, in a very, very specific example that I want you all to know here in this room and on Zoom, and we will repeat this, we are beginning a very specific process. It's starting right now in this room. It's starting in my conversation today with the board steering committee. It will continue next week with the overall board and the rest of the congregation. It's a deliberative, values-based decision process. That's a tenet of Reconstructionist Judaism, of how we figure out specifically the signage that is outside our building. There is a Black Lives Matter banner outside our building, and it was a process that we went through a few years ago in that beautiful values-based decision-making process to mount it. We are talking a lot. We've been having lots of conversations here and there amongst us over the past few weeks, and we are now going to embrace those conversations in a more formal way in our beautiful values-based decision-making process. It's going to happen, and it's starting, and I want to assure you of that. So please understand that. And it's not just the BLM banner. We can talk about flags. We can talk about other signage. We can do this, and we'll do it as promptly as we can. That BLM banner happened after a 2-year process to create a banner policy. We're not going to take that long. We're going to move faster. So in all seriousness, I do want to give you that specific statement as something very concrete for right now in this time. But I also want to wrap up because I know we've been in this room for a while. So thank you so much, Rabbi Waxman. You've really been a gift to us today. And thank you so much to the late Alan Worters for being a wonderful gift to our community, and to Paula Doris Worters for supporting this great lecture. Thank you all for being here. Please hang out for a bit more if you can, and look forward to seeing you all again soon here in our beautiful temple. Thank you.